Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's movie blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today, Fandom Menace is proving me right once again, because as I predicted, the Captain Marvel gigantic huge success was by no doubt going to lead to this, which is happening right now with Fandom Menace. That they were going to try and use this. The shills and the media that protected Captain Marvel, that went out of their way to say, oh, Captain Marvel is wonderful, it's marvelous. Even though I gave it a 2.5 out of 5, it's still fresh. Even though all the trolls and the trolls and the trolls and the trolls, even though there really were no trolls, it was just people saying, I don't have any interest in seeing this film. Or when they did see it, they said, I don't like this film, and yet they wouldn't let them post their reviews, and yet they were still called trolls and labeled as such, and with no real proof whatsoever. And it was just, okay. Well, we already knew that this was all an attempt to show that the media truly do still have power in this world, and Fandom Menace is proving my point with this headline. Why the success of Captain Marvel is terrific news for Star Wars Episode 9. You knew it was coming, guys. Seriously, you knew that this was coming. You knew that as soon as Captain Marvel did well, after there was a huge outpour of people saying, Captain Marvel, the trailers look bad, there's an agenda to this, they're admitting that it's an agenda to it, and trying to get the message out there, and then all of a sudden the film does just crazy bonkers well, because obviously it's in almost every single theater available. It's being forced to be played in 3D, 4DX, all these other, theater programs or theater screens that have, gigantic ticket prices. So of course it was going to do well. I mean, it was crafted to do well from the very beginning, but also, you're dealing with a specific fan base. This is something that I've been talking about the last several videos as the Hounds of Asgard show their disgust and anger with Fandom Menace. Hey, Hounds, it's okay. I got this. So Fandom Menace here is trying to say basically that the MCU fans are the exact same as the Star Wars fans. The problem with this is that it just does not work. It just does not work because there are two very different fandoms. As I've pointed out in previous videos, when you look to Star Wars, what do you have? You have a little bit of an older fan base, right? Obviously the fan base has been around for 30 plus years now. There were people that loved the original trilogy. There are some people that became fans because of the prequels and then went back to the original trilogy and said, oh, this is what happens when you have great acting, great writing, great scripts, and all this stuff put together. And that's just not what we got with the prequels, but that's okay. They're still fun, entertaining, and they still have a lot of, good qualities in their own right. But then we got the sequel trilogy, and many of us were excited for it. I saw The Force Awakens and really liked it. Again, I thought that there were definitely some flaws. Rey was still a Mary Sue, and there were a lot of questions, but there were still interesting questions that were set up. And then, of course, we all know the story. The Last Jedi comes around, objectively a bad movie, can subjectively panned by many as well. And then you look at that and you see, wait a minute, Star Wars fans are not really buying into the Disney universe here. And how do we have proof of that? Oh, wait, that's right. Solo: A Star Wars Story. $396 million or so. Again, making $600 million less than any other Disney-run Star Wars film. And we looked at that and said, okay, well, where did those people go? Did they just, decide not to show up that day? Oh, it was because of bad marketing. It came out in May. I'm sorry, but the time of the month and also the amount of marketing is not going to affect people who are fans of a franchise. If people are fans of a franchise, guess what? That means that they know everything. That means that they already know when it's going to be released. That means that they know everything that there is to know about it, and guess what? That they're going to go out and to support it. But that did not happen with Solo. Why is that? It's not just because of May. Again, the time of the month does not affect your fandom. It's not just because of the marketing, because marketing overall does not affect your fandom. Obviously, some people say, oh, the marketing for Captain Marvel turned a lot of people off, and that is indeed true, but that's also because of a lot of other things going on behind the scenes with Brie Larson and many other, a plethora of other reasons. But there is a difference. There is a clear difference because Star Wars fans checked out. The Fandom Menace is very real. The Fandom Menace is very strong. And Star Wars Celebration, I think, will be a very, very clear indication of that. But of course, we'll have to wait and see for when that happens. But I knew that this was going to happen. I knew that people like Fandom Menace would try and use the success of Captain Marvel to say, see, trolls don't have any impact on the box office. We didn't have any evidence of this until now, because now, yeah, the same trolls that we're going after, the same trolls, yet somehow they're people and, they have identities and they have opinions, etc. But they're still trolls. Somehow they, had no impact on the box office whatsoever. This is proof of that. Ignore Solo. Ignore the man behind the curtain. Ignore everything that happened with Last Jedi. All that was a fluke. All that was just a once in a lifetime fluke. No, it was a different audience. See, the Star Wars audience was not being able to be built up. The new sequel trilogy audience was not built up the same way that the MCU has. The MCU has had 10, 11 years now, 22 films to build up a massive fan base. They started off with the Marvel Comics fans. Slowly over time, they were able to spread to more and more and more people, and now it's just become so overwhelmingly normie or popcorn fan that they could put literally almost anything out there with MCU on the title and make a profit. and make a quick buck. And then when you put a movie in all the screens with all of the fancy stuff and have the tickets as much as they are, well, guess what? Yeah, of course you're going to have, you know, $1 billion film because the normies are going to come out there. I did not see that beforehand. That's why I said, I think this movie's not going to do very well just based on the trends. And I was basing that off of incorrect information. And I've admitted several times now that I got that one wrong, but it was because I totally forgot and totally misjudged how the audiences were so different. The MCU audience has been built up for a long time. So now that there are modern day MCU fans that are fans of the MCU, have almost no affiliation with Marvel Comics, etc. Star Wars fans, though, not a same animal. Not by any stretch of the imagination, which is why you have a movie that actually lost money. You had a Star Wars movie that actually lost $200 million. Oh, that was because of the high production budget. It still would have lost like close to $100 million had they not spent that extra money reshooting the film. They still would have lost money. It still would not have been profitable. But you have Skybone Mendelson trying to say, oh, well, this proves without a shadow of a doubt that, you know, everything else out there is going to be just fine for Star Wars. So again, it talks about here Captain Marvel, how much it's made. It's made a crap ton. It indeed will probably get close to the $800 million worldwide mark soon. As I've said from before, I think that the movie's going to end around $1.2 to $1.5 billion just based off of its first 2 weeks. Third week will tell us a little bit more about the legs. You know, I obviously said that the first 2 weeks is normally a good indication to be able to start predicting how much a movie's going to make down the line. But when it comes to, you know, when it comes to the actual numbers to see, well, just how much of a take will it have in the first 2 weeks, that's when you look to the third, fourth, and fifth weeks, because that's when you start to see, okay, it's dropping off at this percentage, it's dropping off at this rate, it has this amount of competition coming up, and so now we can have a pretty good indication. That's why the range right now is around 1.2 to 1.5. The only way that it could ever not get to the $1 billion mark is if it makes literally 80% of its entire profit in the first 2 weeks, which is a very rare thing. I mean, it's not to say that it's impossible. I mean, you could have a BVS situation here, but let's say it makes the exact same BVS percentage, it still breaks the $1 billion mark. And I just don't think that's going to happen, seeing that many of the showtimes still have this in 3D, in IMAX, in Dolby, in 4D, etc., and all the, you know, all the Ds and all the Mesa, you know, all the massive screens with the massive prices. And so you're going to see all that, and you're going to see the money continue to roll in for this film. It's just going to continue to happen, despite what you know, the Chinese audiences have very much made clear about their thoughts on Captain Marvel as a character. But here is really the meat of everything, and this is the reason why, as I said before, you have to understand that this was essentially the narrative that they wanted from the very beginning. This, to me, shows you why the media was so protective of this movie, because they wanted this movie. They wanted this movie to succeed because they wanted it to be able to be an example that they could say, you see, the trolls, the mystic and mythical trolls of the internet have no power here. You know, but that's because they're real people. We did have an impact on the box office, whether you want to admit it or not. We did, because there were thousands upon thousands of people that did not go to see Captain Marvel, or when they saw it, maybe they went to go and pay for another movie instead. I mean, that's a lot of people. That you can't just deny that fact. Yes, the movie's still making money, but that's just because there are a lot of other people that don't watch YouTube, that don't spend time online, and that pretty much live in ignorance and will watch anything on the big screen, whether the story is good or not. And so you can see here the blowout success of the Brie Larson, Samuel L. Jackson, Reggie the Cat movie means yet again that the trolls had no effect on the film's public reception. That means that while they won't stop shouting, we don't necessarily have to give them a bullhorn or include them as serious elements of the critical narrative. What the internet thinks about something, especially when it's merely a handful of tweets or oh, now it's a handful. First, oh, it was a Russian bot invasion, etc. Oh, now it's just a handful of people. Okay, it's indicative of the general movie-going populace. If it were Mad Max Fury Road, would have cleared $400 million global, and Bohemian Rhapsody wouldn't have been an Oscar-winning $870 million smash. No, because those films did not have the same level of backlash. I'm sorry. Scotty boy, come back to reality for a second, please. What this also means is that the folks over at Lucasfilm, especially Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams, can breathe a sigh of relief. Today, March 18th, meaning we are exactly 9 months from the birth of Reylo's child. I mean, 9 months, counting Thursday previews from the domestic theatrical release of the still untitled Star Wars Episode 9, the J.J. Abrams directed sequel, has been a subject of much speculation, as it is the case with every Star Wars movie since The Empire Strikes Back. Yes, it is allegedly the final movie in the Skywalker solo saga, with Harrison Ford's Han Solo and Mark Hamill's Luke Skywalker killed off, and Carrie Fisher's General Leia set to be written out one way or another due to the actress passing 2.25 years ago. Okay, 2.25 years ago. I really do have to write it that way. The 9th episode in the franchise is also being seen as something of an answer as to whether the online discontent over Rian Johnson's Last Jedi represented the general populace. Guess what? We already had that answer with Solo: A Star Wars Story. That was the answer. That was the movie that came out 5 months after. That was the movie that turned off so many people. And yet, even with that, Episode 9 is still not going to make as much as The Last Jedi. Most likely, I would say. You know, if it really is any indication of the overall feeling of the general populace, as as he likes to say here, I think that you're still going to see an impact. But it's just, again, they're trying to, oh my God, they're trying to do apples and oranges here. They're trying to say MCU audience comes out in droves because they're mindless drones who just want to look at the big screen and say, ooh, flashy images, ooh, superheroes. I like this movie because it's fun. You know, shutting off their brain and shutting off the fact that, objectively speaking, the film is so flawed and breaks canon and is just a giant mess. Comic fans, people who understand canon, people who understand when stories don't make sense, we are the ones saying, oh God, this is ridiculous and this is terrible. I'm sorry, but you saying that now all of a sudden Nick Fury loses his eye because of a cat scratch? Oh, it's not a cat, it's a flurkin. It was a cat scratch that got infected. Changes the entire dynamic of the line when he says, I trusted someone once. Oh, it's so funny now. He trusted a cat. That's what he actually meant. And then the Tesseract does everything away with everything they did in Agent Carter, apparently, because, you know, God, man. Now, here is, I think, my favorite line of the entire article. There are plenty of critics, pundits, and consumers who didn't like The Last Jedi for subjectively valid reasons, just as I didn't care for The Force Awakens. Notice, subjectively valid reasons. No, Scott. There were objective flaws with with both The Force Awakens and also The Last Jedi, but most especially The Last Jedi. From a writing perspective, it was very bad. Matthew Kadish, my boy, has broken this down so well in all of his articles over on Medium. Go check him out, seriously. If you want to know why there are problems, what the objective problems with The Last Jedi are, go check that out. But for him to try and say, oh, it's all subjective, no. Film criticism has two aspects to it. There's a subjective element, and there's also an objective element. And we need to be able to understand the two. We need to be able to figure out, okay, this is how it's going to work. This is how the business works overall. So, gosh, man, with a sheer outpouring of online troll-driven criticism, much of it clouded in sexism and racism, along with an odd inability to accept the notion of Luke Skywalker as anything other than an idealized Jedi superhero, made it hard to discuss the film both for those who loved it and for those who, with no malice or ill intent, did not. Star Wars 8 earned $620 million in North America from a $220 million debut and eventually earned $1.335 billion globally, earning so much, like seriously, 70% of its entire box office in the first 2 weeks. You know, let's just leave that part out for a second. It made almost as much domestically as Aquaman, Bumblebee, and Mary Poppins Returns combined. See, here's the biggest problem. He, again, points out, oh, there's of course people out there who have subjective opinions that they didn't like the Star Wars movie. I mean, I myself didn't like The Force Awakens, subjectively speaking. No, there are objective flaws with it. And even the bigger thing, the bigger talking point from all of this is that, no, Captain Marvel fans are not the same. MCU fans are not the same as Star Wars fans. Are there some crossovers? Sure, you can absolutely say that. But Solo: A Star Wars Story shows without a shadow of a doubt, shows that very clearly there was a backlash. Very clearly there was a backlash. You don't lose money on a Star Wars product. You don't lose $200 million on a Star Wars product if there isn't a backlash. I'm sorry, these are just simple truths. So this is just so ridiculous. Scott Mendelson, thank you for proving once again why I can always rely on you to prove me right on these various things, because I predicted this from the very beginning, that as soon as Captain Marvel did well, if it did indeed do well, the narrative would be this. This proves that Star Wars is fine, the state of Star Wars is fine, and yet he still can't explain why Bob Iger had to come out and say we're slowing things down. He still can't explain why they've been so very careful with everything, why they've canceled projects that were planned from original. Like, seriously, how do you explain all of this stuff? Because Star Wars is just perfectly fine? No, because there was a backlash. It did have an impact on the box office. It's called Solo: Star Wars Story. And when Episode 9 comes out, there will probably be a similar backlash. However, now Disney knows, again through the MCU, that what it can do is it can pack the theaters. It can rent out every single theater. It can force the theaters to have to show 3D, 4DX, whatever it is it wants to show, so that way it can get the biggest number possible. And I would not be surprised if Episode 9 has the same exact release day in China as it did everywhere else in the world, because guess what? They want that perception. They want the perception that Star Wars is fine, that their experiment has worked, and that everything is fine in the Star Wars fandom. We know this to be false. Solo proved this to all of us. But Captain Marvel is, again, what the media shills are going to run to and say, oh, look, this is our proof right here. You know, the trolls didn't do anything here. No, trolls are mythical creatures. And online, it means someone who literally puts something out there just to get a reaction. What you're talking about are people who have opinions. What you're talking about are people who are just trying to speak truth, in many cases, too. Objective truth when it comes to certain films. and yet you're painting them all with a broad brush. Anyone that has a, you know, even somewhat passionate disliking of a franchise or disliking of a film is automatically now labeled a troll. That is so ridiculous. And of course, I would expect nothing better from you, Scott. So thank you once again for proving everything that there is about this, about the shill media in general. Anyway, guys, what are y'all's thoughts about this? What do you think about Scotty Boy? Do you think Scotty Boy is feeding into the hands of all of us here on the internet? I think that they will. I mean, I honestly think, would not be surprised if you see some other channels covering this. EVS obviously loves Scotty Boy. I think it's been a while since we covered a Scotty Boy article, but still, I think that this one would be a great one to cover because, as I said, he's trying to say that Captain Marvel's success proves that there is no actual backlash against Star Wars, and that if it is, it's just a few people on Twitter, it's just a bunch of Russian bots, maybe. It was Russian bots at one point. Yet the narrative will continue to change to whatever fits their narrative. That's what it always comes down to. Well, didn't you change your narrative too, Odin? No, I admitted that I got something wrong because I ignored the fandom. Now that I've acknowledged that fact, I'm like, oh, no, absolutely. It makes total sense now as to why Captain Marvel did so well. When you pack the theaters with, again, you know, the most expensive tickets, because the way it works, guys, is that they book, you know, the booking between theaters and between the studios is that the studios will say, okay, we will let you have our film, but you need to give us these many showtimes in 3D, these many showtimes in 4D, you need to give us these many prime showtimes, etc. So they lay out how it's going to happen. And if the theater complies, great, they get the movie. If they don't comply, okay, we don't have to give you the movie. All right, so you had that going on. Then you had, of course, the shills, like Scott Mendelson, protecting the movie nonstop with articles daily after day after day after day. Well, didn't YouTube also do that too? Didn't you have a bunch of YouTubers like John Talks and everyone else doing that? Well, yeah, because when you have articles like this, lying and spinning, guess what? You need to have just as many videos coming out trying to unspin and give you the straight facts and give you just the straight, objective perspective on all of this. That's what it really comes down to. Anyway, guys, I would love to know your thoughts about Scotty Boy in the comments below. If you like this video, smash that like button, give us a thumbs up, give us a subscribe. You're all amazing, beautiful people. Have a wonderful day, and as always, God bless.